Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Mabon or autumnal equinox Zoom lesson. So there is a lot of stuff that's come out recently in 2022 about Mabon that I was not familiar with. The first thing being that the English pronunciation of Mabon is not proper. That the Welsh pronunciation is Mabon, so Mahbon. So that was something really cool that I learned. And then I wanted to dive more into the mythology of where the name of Mabon comes from and why that was chosen as the name for the equinox. Because as we learned in our pre-recorded lesson, that Mabon is not a traditional Celtic holiday. Now, the autumnal equinox is most certainly a holiday, but Mabon is new. It came out in the 1970s. So one of the things we're going to do during this class is going to be a little bit shorter than usual, is focus and learn from people who are a part of that culture in order to educate us. So I spent some time on YouTube looking for some of the most genuine practitioners I could find, and let me share that with you now.
In the darkest time of the year, I find myself searching for the light of the Mabon, the divine child. In the Welsh tales of the Mabinogi, the Mabon was stolen from his mother, the Modron, or Great Mother, when he was 3 days old. As part of a larger quest in the tale of Culhwch and Olwen, Arthur and his knights must search for the Mabon. For as he is reputed to be the greatest hunter in the lands, only he can aid them in their grander journey. The Mabon is the divine prisoner. The Mabon is us all. The separation from the Great Mother, from the divine feminine, has caused and continues to cause untold damage in our world. The reunification of mother and child, of masculine and feminine, of light and darkness, can bring something truly special, not only to the world, but also to our very selves. For the tale of the Mabon and Modron is a tale that is within us all. It is within and without. To reconnect with the childhood wonder, the enchantment and joy. The natural world is full of wonder and joy. We only need to know where to look for it. In the tale, Arthur and his knights seek out the oldest animals, those sentinels of wisdom in the natural world. Through a tale of questing and of questions, they approach each animal, the black bird of Kilguri, who led them to the stag of Red Nifra, who led them to the owl of Cwm Cwlyd, who led them to the eagle of Gwern Abbey, and he led them to the salmon of Llyn Llw. We must turn to the natural world, and there we will find the wisdom that is needed to restore the balance, to reunite the sun with the mother, the masculine and the feminine, the darkness and the light. We must each become the Modron as well, the mother to that divine child. We must nurture and care for that child physically, emotionally, spiritually. We can find the divine child within if we come to look with the loving eyes of the Great Mother. With the winter solstice fast approaching, and the darkness settling in thick and fast, the light of the divine child and the tender, loving embrace of the Great Mother can help us see through the long winter months. For the tale is not complete if any single portion is left out. The Mabon must be sought part in order for the larger story of the union of Culhwch and Olwen to occur. Each has their part to play in the unfolding of life, and each part affects the rest. My quest this winter has been to find the Mabon and bring him back to the Modron in my own soul. I must be both the mother and child, the masculine and the feminine, the darkness and the light. I must look for and embrace the union, not of opposites, but of complements. For that is where the true balance lies, between the darkness and the light, the days and the nights, the seasons and the cycles of the world. Blessings of the solstice season to you all.
So this is Chris Hughes. I believe she goes by she, has a lot of really interesting information about the Celtic mythology if you're interested in that. So let's get started. Okay.
Mabon ap Modron. And that's his relationship with a deity known in Roman Britain as Cunomaglos. This is a Celtic name, which I don't think is found in Gaul. The Cuno part means dog or hound, while Maglos means chief or lord. Sometimes it's translated as prince. So the name means something like hound lord or master of hounds, almost certainly a deity in charge of dogs. In Roman Britain, Cunomaglos is paired with Apollo. The Romans liked to pair local deities with whichever of their own they thought was most similar. The attributes of the Roman Apollo are quite varied. He's associated with healing, with the sun and youth, with hunting, and the female huntress Diana, who is his sister. And he's associated with poetry and music, especially the music of the lyre. Another Celtic deity paired with Apollo in Britain, of course, is Maponos. Now, Maponos is also known on the continent. There was a massively important healing site at Chamalières in France, and another one that we don't know much about at Savigny. In Britain, there are a number of altars and inscriptions to Maponos, mostly Apollo Maponos in the north. 3 along Hadrian's Wall, and another one at Ribchester near modern-day Blackpool. 2 of these show a figure with both a lyre and symbols of hunting. Whether these figures are meant to depict Apollo or Maponos or both, we can't really say, but they're similar to other Roman carvings of Apollo. In the same part of Britain, there are a few place names which relate to Maponos, like Maporeton, the ford of Maponos, and there are also 2 notable places seemingly named for Mabon, the town of Mabon in Dumfriesshire, and the Clachmabenstein near the shores of the Solway. There's also this curious carving, which was found at a nearby Roman fort, which seems to mention Maponos, with what appears to be a carving of a dog. It's not very conclusive. All of this activity is concentrated in the north, mostly near Hadrian's Wall, but we don't find any mention of Maponos in southern Britain. Maponos seems to reappear later in Welsh literature, though, as Mabon ap Modron. He is mentioned in the Book of Taliesin, the Book of Carmarthen, the Triads of Britain, and the Stanzas of the Greys. However, it's in the story of Culhwch and Olwen, one of the native tales found in the Mabinogion, that we finally learn more about Mabon ap Modron. Culhwch and Olwen concerns a quest for a supernatural Irish boar known as the Tuairc Truith. Mabon is central to the story because the boar cannot be hunted without his help. Tuairc Truith can only be successfully pursued by a special hound called Dridwan, and only Mabon can control this dog. In the famous exchange between the giant Ysbyddaden, who instigates the hunt, and the young hero Culhwch, Ysbyddaden says, Tuath Truith will not be hunted until Dridwin, the pup of Graid, son of Eri, is got. And then Kilhuch responds, it is easy for me to get that, though you may think it will not be easy. This exchange continues with Ysbyddaden saying, though you may get that, there is that which you will not get. There is no huntsman in the world who might have the skills to hunt with that hound, except for Mabon, son of Modron, who was taken from his mother at 3 nights old. It is not known where he is, nor which he is, either alive or dead. I think it's fair to say that this text is describing Mabon as a lord or master of hounds here. And there's another mention of this skill a bit further on in the story. A considerable chunk of Kilhuch and Alwyn is taken up with the search for Mabon, during which Arthur's men question a series of animals. Eventually, an ancient salmon leads them to him, and the significant thing to our exploration is where he's found, Gloucester, on the banks of the Severn. And the salmon says, as much as I know, I will tell. With each flood tide, I come up along the river as far as the bend at the wall in Caerloyw, and there I found such misfortune as I have never found in my life. The misfortune the salmon is talking about is the lamentation of Mabon in his prison in the dungeons of the castle. The storyteller goes to great lengths to emphasize how Mabon has been imprisoned in the castle for an immeasurably long time. What I think we're seeing here is a deep relationship being drawn between Mabon ap Modron and Gloucester and the Severn. Gloucester Castle no longer exists. You can see from this old engraving from when it was still in use as a prison in the 18th century, how close to the water it was. Anyway, the long and the short of it is that Arthur and his men free Mabon so that they can all get on with the job of hunting the Tuath Truith, or at least preparing to do so. There are a whole list of side quests that Arthur and his men have to perform on Kilhuch's behalf, including the acquisition of more hunting dogs, and this episode is described here. After that, Arthur went to Brittany, and Mabon, son of Mecht, went with him, and Gwarai, golden hair, to seek the 2 dogs of Glithvur, the Breton. And Mabon, son of Mecht, went with the 2 dogs of Glithvur, the Breton, in his hand, and Dridwan, the pup of Graid, son of Eri. It's reasonable to assume that Mabon, son of Mecht, here is just another way of speaking about Mabon ap Modron. So now we see Mabon in charge of 3 famous hunting dogs. One thing I haven't mentioned is the reason why they must hunt the Tuath Truith. This fierce giant of a boar has a comb, a razor, and a scissors lodged in the bristles between his ears. And these items are needed to shave and barber the giant, Ysbyddaden. Yeah, you really need to read the whole story. Now, the tale trundles on toward the big showdown between Arthur's forces and the Tuath Truith, who by now has left Ireland and is threatening to lay waste to Cornwall. And here we find Mabon in his moment of glory back at the river Severn. And they turned back from there along the Severn, and they waylaid him there with all there was of proven warriors in the island, and they drove him by sheer force into the Severn. And Mabon, son of Modron, went with him on white Dunmane, the horse of Gwedu, into the Severn. And Arthur made an attack on him, and the champions of Britain with him. And then it goes on to mention some of the warriors by name. And they grasped him first by the feet, and they dunked him in the Severn, so that it was flooding over him. Mabon, son of Modron, spurred his stallion on one side and got the razor from him. And here, once Mabon has orchestrated this attack and taken the razor, he disappears from the story, and he isn't mentioned again. So I promised to tell you about Cunomaglos, and before I do, I'll just recap on what we've discovered about Mabon ap Modron. Through his relationship to Maponos, we might associate him both with healing and with the Roman god Apollo. And through the points I've highlighted in Kilhuch and Alwyn, his close, somewhat mystical association with the river Severn is clear, as is his superior ability with hunting dogs. Evidence for the cult of Cunomaglos is centered in the Cotswolds to the south of the Severn, where various artifacts have been found. By far the best documented site is the one at Nettleton Shrub, which was used and reused over several centuries and appears to have been associated with a healing cult. This is a complex site archaeologically, which was thoroughly investigated by W.J. Wedlake between 1956 and 1972. I want to look at some excerpts of Wedlake's summary of the history of the site. Soon after AD 69, a small circular shrine, probably dedicated to the god Apollo, was built in the valley alongside the river, possibly superseding a Celtic religious cult already established in the valley. The construction of a large hostel along the Fossway and a spectacular rectangular hall in close proximity to the shrine indicates a growing interest in the shrine. They were followed about AD 230 by the erection of a large octagonal podium, which encompassed a small shrine. This arrangement continued until about AD 250, when the circular shrine was destroyed by fire. Subsequently, a large octagonal temple was built on the octagonal podium, which survived the fire. After the construction of the octagonal temple, a larger hostel was built, and the settlement continued to develop at an astonishing rate. Additions were made to buildings to cope with the increasing interest in the cult center. Soon after AD 330, it ceased to be used for pagan worship, and the building fell into a state of disrepair. And evidence suggests that the building was used as a Christian church. But for a short period, about AD 370, a small north part of the former central shrine was set up and used for a brief resurgence of pagan worship. The abundant evidence of fire and a large number of late 4th century coins in the fire debris suggests raids by Irish pirates who came by way of the Bristol Channel. At some time after the turn of the 5th century, the settlement came to an abrupt end. Many human bones found in the latest level testify that the inhabitants met with a violent death. This is the inscribed altar mentioned by Wedlake. It's somewhat broken, but the inscription is clear. To the god Apollo, Cunomaglos, Corotica, daughter of Eutus, paid her vow willingly, deservedly. So the altar was erected and paid for by a woman. We can only wonder what vows she made to Cunomaglos or what stories she knew about him, for he surely will have had a myth or two. This beautiful bronze plaque also comes from Nettleton. In 2013, another depiction of Cunomaglos was found at Sidley Castle, having long been misplaced in a cupboard. A BBC article at the time said that there were a total of 4 depictions of Cunomaglos from the Cotswolds and 3 from London, but I haven't been able to track any more down to show you. What strikes me are the similarities in associations between Mabon ap Modron and Cunomaglos, dogs and healing, and a close association with Apollo and the Severn.
So as we saw in that video, like we've talked about, that the Celtic mythology is very unknown to us, and we only have bits and pieces. And that video did a nice job of showing the synchronization over time of religion, right? So first we had whatever the Celtic mythology was, and then we had the English, which is the Mabon Madron, and then we see that the Romans came in and called it Apollo, and then later it was taken by Christians. So we see that this story is really being perpetuated with the same symbols over time. Another important part of Mabon that she did not go over, that we will do in just a moment, is the mythology of the equinox when it comes to Mabon. So as we discussed in the pre-recorded video, that all of the Wiccan sabbats follow the journey of the sun. And for those of you who are in the Seekers of Occultorum class, we know that everything follows the hero's journey, which is discovered as, or known as, the monomyth by Joseph Campbell. So Mabon is, if we're thinking of it like a movie, the second act. This is where the sun begins to fade before it dies during Samhain. And this is a natural part of life. The circle of life is to have high moments, you know, our high noon, which we could say as Ostera, and then it slowly comes to fade. So hopefully that gave you a little bit more context about who Mabon was and why that energy is so important. Especially as we go into the darkness, it's important that we can find that unification within ourselves. So it may be seen as child and mother, it could be seen as light and dark. And I hope that's what all of you are starting to notice in our classes about the cycles of the sun. They are a reflection of cycles within ourselves. There will be points where we have lots of energy, and then there will be points where we do not. If you have a period or a menstrual cycle, you will also notice this very easily within yourself and your energy. For when you are ovulating, you will have more energy versus when you are menstruating, which where you'll have less energy. So there are highs and there are lows. There is light and there is dark. And the story of Mabon ultimately is about finding that balance within ourselves. And as we did this week for our our Mabon celebration, is that we are practicing gratitude. We are giving back to the earth, giving back to ourselves in order to recognize all that we have. So we are prepared to make that journey into the darkness. Does anyone have anything they would like to share? Were there any experiences that you had during this solstice that maybe brought you to some revelations? And that's okay if you don't. It can be a private kind of reflection, and maybe that you are just starting to recognize those steps within yourself. Remember that every story that is external is a reflection of something that is internal. And that is the beauty of esotericism, mythology, is that these are created not necessarily to be stories of truth as if they actually happened. Did Arthur and his knights really go to all those different animals? Probably not. But there is a story of truth about how that energy reflects into you. I'm sure every single one of those animals has a very special symbology, and their order is also most likely very symbolical. I feel like I have been feeling the power of light and dark simultaneously over the last couple of weeks. Absolutely. Especially as we get closer to the solstice. Remember, the solstice is exactly when the day is half light and half dark. So you're going to feel those energies. They don't need to be in conflict with each other. In nature, they are not in conflict with each other. They are in perfect balance and harmony. And sometimes that means things have to go a little off balance. So when there's darkness, there's less light. And when there's more light, there's less darkness. And then when we come back to the equinoxes where they're the perfect equilibrium, just like our lives, we are all going through these cycles. And it's all a learning point for us. When you can keep in tune with nature and you keep in tune with the natural world around you, it will be a lot easier to control and understand what's happening in your life. It doesn't always need to feel like it's out of control or out of our hands. There's not a whole lot of information about Mabon. I spent a lot of time looking for it. It is like I said, Welsh mythology. And it's been tedious to find information, to say the least. Remember, the name Mabon comes from the neo-pagan uh, revitalization of the 1960s and 70s. And before that, it really referred to the autumnal equinox, where we see that change and shift in power. Although this holiday is not the brightest or the spookiest or the coolest, I would argue it's probably one of the most important, because it makes a major shift from focusing our life externally to coming internal and doing that self-reflection during the dark part of the year. And that's all I have for you today. I know this was a little bit of a shorter class, and I appreciate all of you who came. We have River, Rebecca, and B. there's always so much more to learn. And if you find more information about Mabon Madron, please let me know. I would love to learn. I can't wait for winter either. Winter and fall are two of my favorite holidays. So thank you so much for joining me today. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them for you. And I wish you all the best self-reflection and inner change that comes through the next couple of months. So take care of yourselves. Make sure we spend time resting. Remember, I posted on the Discord, there are 7 different types of rest. So we want to make sure that we're utilizing all of those so we don't burn out or injure ourselves. So thank you all so much for joining me. I hope you have a lovely day and stay magical. Bye.